But I do feel like that connection between creativity and artistry is what developers and technologists crave. Like, what are we doing? We're creating a digital world that is for humans to have a presentation layer to experience new and amazing things. And that's living.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Trace Talks. We have a wonderful guest today. I'll let you introduce yourself, Dana, but today we have Dana, who is an amazing person. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Howdy y'all, Dana Lawson, CTO of Netlify, ex-GitHubber, ex-Envisioner, ex-New Relican, ex-all the things. Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me, Pedro and John.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. We had a great intro conversation a couple weeks ago with you and really enjoyed the conversation. But for those of us the people who might be listening, why don't you let them know who Netlify is and kind of a little bit about what you do there?
Netlify is
activities.
My daily activities. Spreadsheets and email, duh, I'm an executive. No, Netlify is a composable web platform. We help enable web developers and creators alike take their idea all the way to production. So we connect to your Git repositories, no matter what flavor of Git you use. We help you build, design, deploy with a global CDN network with performance. It's pretty fun. And my daily duties, I'm Chief Technology Officer, but that means a lot of different stuff to a lot of different people. And as I joke, it is mainly spreadsheets and emails and videos. But honestly, my job is to inspire, lead, and break through all the problems that we have, building amazing and compelling software. So I have the product, design, and engineering teams. We all work together under my organization.
Amazing. And I know that, now you're an inspiring leader, you're CTO of a company, but obviously it wasn't always that way. There was like a path to get there. And I think you came from a much different background before, right? We had a call about you being sort of an artist and that. So I'd love to hear sort of where your career started and your sort of trajectory and how you got here as a CTO.
I am so blessed to be surrounded with a lot of like the Silicon Valley greats, and most of them went to MIT and Stanford. But not all of them. Some of them are dropouts too. But I did have that trajectory. When I started out being a nerd, I was really into art. I've always loved science and math because I'm one of those people. But I grew up in Southeast New Mexico, Texas, and I was like, I'm gonna be Georgia O'Keeffe. I'm gonna paint. I'm gonna draw. Parents weren't really thrilled about going to college for painting and drawing because that means being a poor, starving artist. You got to be really good in the art world. You got to be like. First of all, you got to know some people.
Especially when you're alive.
And you got to be good. And I was mediocre and knew nobody. So like my odds weren't very good. And this is pre-internet. And so on a crazy whim, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I joined the U.S. Army. How you go from art school to the Army? Hello. I'm a multifaceted person. And I really...
2 letters are the same, right? 2 letters, art, Army.
I think that, I wasn't always great with spelling. I was more of a math person. I should have looked a little bit closer. But, it was funny because you go and you sign up for the military in the United States. They make you take this test. Well, they used to back in the day. I think they still do. I don't do Army research anymore. It's called the ASVAB. And essentially it determines your military occupation, right? Like, what are you good at? I scored really good on the math stuff. They didn't have an art section. I would have dominated. Go fig. They didn't have it. This job came up in the late 90s is like information systems operator, analysis developer, like everything tech because they didn't know what to call it. And I was like, computers need air conditioning. And here I am because of that fateful choice of choosing air conditioning. Because computers needed it, my own need to be comfortable. But honestly, I loved it. I went to the U.S. Computer Science School that they had made. I don't know if it's still there. It was in Georgia at the time. And it was an immersive 12 months of bare bones networking to all the way to C language. And then you get out and you're like, okay. And I got positioned to really create and administer all the military applications. And so from there, it's but long story even longer, I was IC. I've been everything you can be in developing and creating software. I was a sysadmin. I was DevOps. I was an SRE. Every letter in the alphabet that we attach to what our jobs are. I've done them, like QA, TPM, TIM, PM. And, I just got bit with that leadership bug, and I really started going down the path of leading teams and not becoming an individual contributor. And then here we are.
Yeah, that's a interesting way to get into a career. There's air conditioning there, so I'm going to jump in. Did you find that transition from being an artist, a former art student, artist, and then going into Army and tech, was that an easy transition for you? Did you really enjoy it? Did you pick it up quickly, or did you just really enjoy the air conditioning?
I mean, one, I'm in
Or both?
Portland, Oregon, and today it's going to be 100 degrees. And I think this entire city is like scared. I mean, I'm looking out. I'm not going out today. It never gets this hot. But no, I mean, I was already doing a lot of stuff in Adobe, like the early Adobe days and graphic arts. And like I had back when Microsoft and Front Page, y'all remember that? Did y'all do any of that? That
A
was
little
probably
bit, yeah.
real.
I went to art school too.
Oh, well then, so like I did web design when there wasn't like you didn't know anything. Like we all know how to make websites. Like I was making some GeoCities. I was doing that.
Wow,
Oh yeah.
GeoCities.
I was a webmaster, y'all. All right. So, but I always looked at through this lens of like being able to be creative. Like that is all we actually are. Like maybe it's not you hands to keyboards and you're taking those requirements, but a lot of the times those early ideas are all you. And the way that we write code is individual to us, even though the AIs come and take our jobs, it still is, because you get to determine what goes where, how it functions, and how the end user is going to deal with it. And like, it can be language frameworks. I mean, you could do it in so many different ways. And it wasn't a weird push for me. It was actually really natural. I was just like, but I'm very curious. I'm one of those people that like, it don't matter where I'm at, I'm going to have a good time. And it's very annoying to other people. But to me, I'm like, you know what? That's just how I roll, because it's not the place you are. It's the people and the experiences you have and who you're with. And so I loved it. I was just like, this is fascinating. I never in my wildest dreams ever thought I would be doing what I got to do and getting to like live from, man, the first job they gave me in the military was changing backup tapes. Like they didn't trust me to do shit except change tapes, and they were smart because I had ruined a bunch of servers at one point, but that's a whole different story. And so they're like, Lawson, you get to change the tapes. And so I got to incrementally like grow my skill set and apply it. And it was great. It was a great job. But I do feel like that connection between creativity and artistry is what developers and technologists crave. Like, what are we doing? We're creating a digital world that is for humans to have a presentation layer to experience new and amazing things. And that's living.
Yeah. And I feel that most of the people we talk to as well on this podcast and otherwise just in our daily sales life, we're speaking to a highly technical audience, selling our product. And most of them are creatives in some capacity. A lot of musicians, tons of musicians. I think almost everyone at Directus plays some kind of musical instrument. So I definitely agree there. So what was that like? Go ahead, John.
Well, I just want to really pause to call out that you changed backup tapes. When I first got into tech and I realized that backups were being kept on tapes, literal tapes, I was so shocked because I was selling data center equipment. I'm like, wait a second, people are still backing up on tapes. So I just had to call that out. That brought back some memories from my past days and probably still to this day. I know some obviously digital backups are huge, but I'm impressed that you were changing those actual tapes because I knew those people existed, but you were one of them.
Oh man, it was not a glamorous job. You literally go into a colo with a tray. Yep. And you're like, it's the A day because you had A/B tapes, all right? And there's this software called it's this software called Veritas. Oh my gosh, people are going to have to go Google this shit. All right,
I sold that stuff.
You sold Veritas? Oh man, no. But yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, tapes. We should have a whole like discussion one day about like tech of past, like the tech museum.
Yeah. Sorry, Pedro. Go ahead. I interrupted just because I had to call it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe that's another show we could put on Directus TV, digging into the tech past,
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And so what was that moment that for you kind of transitioning from an individual contributor to a manager, you had mentioned you sort of got into leadership. You really liked leading teams. What was that initial pivot point from being an individual contributor to a leader?
I mean, I think a lot of people that I've met that have been in these positions, there's something that honestly is natural that comes with it. And for me, it wasn't this like, I want to be a manager. I absolutely did not want to tell people what to do. I don't like people telling me what to do, believe it or not. But I just wouldn't stop my mouth from running. And I was like, we should do this. We should do this. Here's why. And I'm like on my soapbox, just saying, here's why here's how we're going to unlock this. And they're like, listen, why don't you just tell everybody what to do? You're doing it anyway. They don't want a sideline manager. You might as well just be it. And I was like, well, I've never done that. I mean, I've done, I guess, different leadership stuff because naturally you have those opportunities in the military that kind of force you into like these different things to do. And I don't know, I've had jobs and jobs of days pass. And I just feel like, at that moment I was like, oh, okay. And from there, it was just like, okay, how do I change this trajectory? The hardest transition, I think, really was, when you become into leadership and you start leading teams, a lot of us have been individual contributors and you're like, wait a minute. And if you have a good culture, I hate that us versus them culture. It's like, your boss is just an adult too, trying to make money. There ain't no us versus them. I mean, if there is, like, go somewhere else. And so I really just would approach it. The hardest part for me was not separating myself and saying, oh, now this is my new role, but more of like, this isn't my role. Like, that's not your, like, for me, it was like that's not your job no more. And that's still hard for me, where you could get so immersed with just like in the flow zone of writing code. And you're like, as a leader, like, yeah, you can, as a frontline manager, you may do some of that, but that's not your job no more. Like, if you want to be great, your job is to empower, enable, align, and motivate, and realize what your role is. And maybe you're a team where you're a player coach and you get to still do that, but that's not your primary. Your engineers, that's their primary. And that was the hardest transition for me, making that. But to get to that, I mean, it kind of came a little naturally. And then from there, it just was like that hunger to take on more. And, it was funny because, again, I never expected, like, a lot of people are like, one day I will run my own company or I'm going to be a CEO. I was like, no way. I never thought that. I just always wanted to do amazing things with amazing people and hopefully change the world. Like, to me, that's more important. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a hard trajectory. I think, again, like, separating what you used to do seems to be the hardest part for people that transition. And there's only been like one or two times in my career where I've ever met anybody that was like, I want to be a manager. And I'm like, what? Like, that's your goal? Like, why? Like, why do you want to do that? And usually when they want to be a manager and they're that resound, it's for the wrong reasons. Like, straight up. It's not all the time, but I mean, I've heard one person's like, oh, I want to be a manager. I said, why do you want to be a manager? Because I could tell everybody what to do and I could quit fighting battles and like, I could just get it done. And I was like, what planet do you live in? Like, because people, I said, welcome to management. Your job is just fighting battles and trying to get, people to agree and commit or disagree and commit, but commit is your long goal. And so, like, you really feel like a used car salesman, half the time going like, no, sorry, no, that price is not going to work. I'm sorry, this is not going to work. Yeah. So it's not, if you have a fantasy of command and control and leadership, like, again, you got to find the culture that's how they vibe. They're out there, but like most places where a lot of people are happy to work, they don't want that.
Yeah. You mentioned putting down some of the tasks that you had previously done as an IC and finding that a little bit of a struggle to put those tasks down. And then you also mentioned kind of fitting right into leadership. Was there any learning curve, or is your personality one where whatever the task is on your plate, you'll figure out and do it? And then I guess the second part of that question is, were there parts, because you didn't go in searching for leadership. So did you get into leadership and managing teams and say, oh man, this spreadsheet stuff sucks, like, I don't like this part, but I'll do it anyways? But so I guess, what was that learning curve like? And were there parts where you're like, I didn't even know I'd have to do this stuff?
Oh man, I think the actual learning curve is is not knowing what you do need to shift and having to grow into that on the other side of the house, because you can really look really shallowly and be like, well, what's the big difference? You're just breaking down tasks and giving projects out. That's what leadership is. Absolutely not. I think the learning curve is really dialing into, okay, well, how do I really start having effective communication? Like, obviously I was somewhat good at it. I'm now in this position, but how do I refine it? How do I talk to different personalities? Because as a tech lead or an IC, you're just talking to mostly other engineers, sometimes product people, but they're still your people, right? Not when you become into leadership, you have different stakeholders. And I think the biggest opportunity to learn is to understand how to speak their language, how to communicate effectively, and how to distill that information down so that there's still alignment between both parties, so that you're not communicating in a way where this side hears something different than this side. And sometimes that can happen because breaking down really audacious technical things for people that are more on the business side, sometimes when they're motivated by different things, they'll hear different things. And the example I give is like, let's say a success manager comes to you and says, so where are we at with that bug? And the engineer's like, well, we're going to be code complete in 2 days and we're going to ship it tomorrow. Great, you're shipping it tomorrow. It's like, no, stop. Yes, technically we are shipping it into staging and integration tomorrow, and there's still more behind that. And what you mean by code complete means something different to go to market. So you have to be really that translator, or you're going to cause friction. And as a manager, guess what your only job really is to remove friction. At the end of the day, your job is to remove friction. And the way that you do that is through the morning's problems that cascade into the night. And you're constantly being agile and saying, where do I help people not run into anything that's impeding them from what they're trying to do? That's really all you got to do. So I think that was the hardest kind of like, and then as you go further into it, right? Like your frontline manager, like, okay, maybe I'm talking to support, maybe I'm talking to marketing. You go to director. Now the table stakes are like, now you're learning the economics of operating and running a business, right? Okay. Now it's like contribution margins, cost of goods sold, CapEx, OpEx, all these financial terms that you think we have acronyms. Go talk to an accountant. They have just as many. Okay. And sales, I don't even know what they're talking about half the time. BDR, SDR, I'm like, I don't know. I do now though, but that's the stuff that like, as an engineer, you don't learn that. There's no school to teach. There's no engine. We can go, like I said, you can go to Stanford, MIT. They ain't going to teach you about how to look at a financial forecast weighted against two growth motions and outputs and forecasted. Like, it's all things that maybe you took a side business class, but most of the time you're learning it. You're learning it on the job as you move up that corporate ladder.
Yeah, that's wild. I think that, I just personally, that's something that I've been focused on a lot, is really understanding different points of view. And it's something that I sort of, I don't know, maybe it's the Libra in me, just trying to like balance everyone and play like the diplomat in most situations. But what do you think that you pull from to have that sort of knowledge now, and being that translator and being able to effectively communicate and be that diplomat between, your teams?
I mean, I have a big mouth, Pedro, so like you wouldn't believe this, but like active listening is so important, and really just practicing on. My mind runs a million miles a minute. Like I am like, I've been able to challenge my ADHD into something productive, which is good, not good. Okay. But it's really about taking that moment and forcing myself to really go into active listening mode and pushing against those instinctual, I need to go, I need to execute, I need to push, because you're so trained to have maximum productivity. And in software engineering, it's about that tempo of delivery. And then when you're on the other side and you're working through, really, how do I express this to hundreds of thousands of users and get to start internally with my team first? Like it is again an art. It is something that you have to inherently start to develop. And what I do is I try to spend time just learning their business, understanding their workflows, putting on that product research mindset that we have as engineers and technologists to say, well, if I wanted to understand my ideal customer profile, well, my ideal customer right now is my partner over here on the side of the business. How do they work? How do they operate? How can I meet them where they are? And so also just like talking to other mentors and like people and like getting advice and like seeking feedback. I don't think I've ever not had an employer review tell me you're too verbose. I mean, it's a work in progress. I'll always be too verbose, but like really taking in that feedback and trying to understand where you can be better. So that self-reflection, those 360s. So all those things that you can do and bringing them in together to understand. But I think active listening really, which there's a whole bunch of techniques out there to do that.
No, absolutely. And do you think that your experience and your previous background in, the alphabet soup of all the roles has helped in that? Like you've had to sort of understand the different roles that you manage and the different roles that you sort of sell to internally and understand the languages that they speak?
Oh yeah. I mean, I love it. That's where I always encourage people to get out of their comfort zone. Like do it. Like I've done so many things that I never honestly was qualified for. So thank you to all those people out there that believed in me. Cause like, I don't know if I would have put myself in that position, but here we are. And it's really about taking opportunities and finding those spaces within what you know and filling the gap, right? Like it's really human nature to double down in the areas where we're comfortable, where we can sit and say, I can just crush it. And in times of duress, we do that. We seek that comfort in repetitiveness and consistency. I don't like it. I get bored. I like it sometimes, and most of the time, like when I'm getting comfortable, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta go find my next problem. And so I push, and I've had the opportunity through the alphabet soup to do stuff that was kind of orthogonal to what I already had known. Like I got a wonderful opportunity to do business development, like pure business development. And when I got tapped to do that, I was like, are you sure? I was like, I have been an engineering leader for a million years. You want me to do biz dev? Like that is on the other side of the house. I do not even know.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, our business is talking to developer. Our business is expansion. Our business is helping, really the value of our platform be open to everyone. And so when you think of business development, there's nobody better than a technologist that's right in it sometimes. However, you still need that other side of business acumen and that understanding of the sales operation and motion to be able to be effective, because at the end of the day, the stakes are different and it's just a different type of ball game than delivering software. And that experience alone, I'm like you can't go to school to get to learn that. And to me, it just strengthens that inner team empathy that you need to have as startup, because you're all pushing for the same goal and it's going to be uncomfortable. Even if you are in your sweet spot, you're going to have moments in your trajectory where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And having empathy holistically helps everybody be better to deliver what they're doing. You can't just have a well-oiled machine on one side of your house and then the other not be working, or it's all going to fail.
No, I absolutely agree. And I've seen that at the different companies that I've been in. Sometimes it's hard to align, especially when it's the technical teams versus the less technical teams, and being able to speak that common language. Is that something that, obviously they don't teach that in school, like you've mentioned. Is that something that you've taught as a manager to the folks that you manage on the technical side, like balancing, the technical acumen with the people skills and sort of the goals of the business, which are, ultimately to earn revenue and keep everyone employed?
Heck yeah. I mean, I think that's my number one job, right? Like I'm always trying to get my leaders to work me out of a job. Like the best, example of leadership is the person behind you taking your job or them going on to do the job you were doing. That's it. That's all I live for, is to see the people that I had the opportunity to partner with go on and do bigger, better things, and me having a small little piece of that narrative and hopefully being positive. I know it ain't all roses, but I think that's something that you have to do, because it doesn't, I talk about, it all comes naturally. This is the part of the house that don't come naturally. This is the part where you have to be curious. You have to have your humility low and do a little homework, do a little research, and try to meet them in the common ground. And I try to do that. Like, a lot of us have been utilizing, objectives, key results, or other frameworks, and they can get so convoluted with what you see the lens of the world. And as an executive, it's about that abstraction so that everybody can understand it. If they can't, then why? And so from a manager training perspective, manager enablement is so important. Unless, I don't think a lot of places are going to get managers and be like, listen, I expect you to be a career manager. So like, I ain't going to teach you nothing new. Just keep the job rolling. Like, I don't know. I've been around for a hot minute. That's how it was in my day when we had cubicle cities. You were just like waiting for somebody to retire to get your job, to get the next job. It's not like that. And it hasn't been like that. And so again, as a leader, if you have your goal set on really raising the bar on your team and getting them to the next level, it's finding those opportunities and those skill gaps and then teaching them that common language. And there's so many darn resources, because it's not just business speak, but when you have also a growing company and a global customer base, you also need to know culturally, like the nuances. And there's some great books out there. I always recommend The Cultural Map. It's a book that helps you distinguish really how, if you're like an American, how you show up, or Western society. And it's really an interesting read. And I think those are some of the things that I try to encourage my leadership team as they're working on that voice is be customer centric, internal and external. And that means business acumen and speak, but also just human to human and understanding how they were brought up in this world and how they culturally represent themselves. So I think it goes hand in hand.
So many nuances to it because, it's not just internally between the different teams and the way that they speak, but also culturally. You've got companies that are now global with remote work just being sort of the default in a lot of these areas. So maintaining that company culture is also important. And these small little things can cause a rub between, the Americans and the Europeans that have totally different styles of work-life balance and culture and everything. So I think that's really important. Are there any specific like exercises or resources that, or strategies that you implement within your teams to try and keep that cohesive culture?
I mean, definitely, we try to do enablements and trainings, not just for managers, but for people, and they cross the chasm from technical skills to soft skills. Like you need both, whether it's public speaking, because public speaking is actually another good opportunity to refine your message house, your internal message house. If you can't say it in an elevator pitch, then you're probably not speaking common enough language so that people can understand your value. So I always recommend get some speaker training. Believe it or not, I've had it. They teach you some tips. They're really, really good. But in addition to that, I would also say that, some good resources would be writing things down with clear lines of ownership to also help clear up some of the ambiguity. Because again, when you're talking about multicultural teams from many, many different countries, and English is second language for peeps. I mean, at Netlify, I think we have 17 countries represented in our little amazing startup. That's a lot of different people from a lot of different places doing a lot of different things. Is we utilize tools like the DAISY, drivers, approvers, contributors, inform, and these frameworks so that you can drive decision making. And sometimes you have to leverage just written, because maybe you're having a block where there's friction within the spoken communication. A lot of people can read better than they can speak, self-included, right? Like I can speak, I can read Spanish all day and I can speak it un poquito. But I think that there's those opportunities too, and other things that you can utilize to find that alignment. And so I'm a big fan of DAISYs and RACIs to really ensure you have clear ownership and that's been understood. And then also, really just pushing a written culture, like don't keep stuff in the ether. And there's so many, come on now, like there's so many tools that do it for you. Like 4 years ago, we didn't have a little AI recorder that did a transcript and a summary. You can do all that now. Don't tell me you can't. Yeah. And I tell people, I'm like, you're not comfortable. I don't know. Go use your model, your choice, your chat bot of choice. I don't care.
Right.
It's Claude, Gemini.
Even as a training tool, right? Like you can have conversations with these things and that's only improving. I mean, I've done job interviews even where I'm like, simulate this.
Yes.
Simulate. You're interviewing me for this role. Here's the resume, copy paste, right, and have a little conversation. Those types of things can even be pretty.
Use them. Use the tools. Like we're all learning them, and like again, that's a double-edged sword. You're like, oh, I get to understand this whatever we're saying AI is, and how to be better. And I think, you got to be a technophile. That's why you're in this role. You got to stay on the latest. You got to love it. You got to know it. And I encourage it. I'm like, go ask some
Yeah, I
AI
think
where
it's
you
just
can
like
feel
at the end of
safe.
the day, like refining your communication skill set. I keep seeing these ads for like Bob Iger's master class or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing he's saying in these ads is just like your vision or your idea is only as good as your ability to articulate it. And, back to your point, it's like having that ability to communicate those ideas. If you can't do it verbally, like at least writing them down and continuing to practice those so that you can win over your team, so you can become a better leader, even a better individual contributor. Like everyone's got ideas. So your ability to communicate that with others, I think is probably the point here.
You better believe it. I mean, shoot, like a lot of engineers have that leadership charisma, and they want to refine that side of the house. Let them, like, that's the hard. I mean, again, I think that comes back to the harder part. We are so lucky to have this advanced tool set around us that we can go and source information, we can ask questions, we can autofill, we can move, but you got to put in the work on the other side. And so, like, I definitely see, an opportunity with getting people more comfortable, and again, utilizing the tool sets to do so. And that's where, like you said, using it to like mock interview, like, yes, go do that. It's some of them are good enough. I mean, some of them are not great enough, but it gives you also some, which is interesting, I think, because people were like, oh, I don't trust the AI and the models, but it's private. It's better than going into, like, can we role play in Slack? Like, nobody wants to do that. Like,
I mean,
and
I've been using even like there's an app that I've been using called Sonia. I actually spoke to the team a couple of weeks ago. They were gathering some feedback, but it's an AI therapy app. And what I kind of started to realize, and maybe this is what some of these apps are sort of, they've modeled everything after their CBT techniques, and it has like an in-depth knowledge of therapeutic techniques. But what I've realized is there's this barrier when you're talking to a human. Obviously, you're presenting the best version of yourself. You're not being as raw as you could be. And there's always some sort of, I don't know, like subjectivism on the other side. And that somebody's, judging you in a way where when you talk to the AI, there's zero judgment. You're talking to a computer. Your mind sort of knows it. So you speak to it a little differently. And for something like therapy or something like training, I remember back in college, we used to do these sales role plays. Those things are terrifying. Yeah. You're doing it in front of the class with the professor, and it's like, you're getting graded on this. Yeah. And to do that with AI, I think would be, it's just such an improvement. Even if it's not perfect, it's still going to at least let you drop the guard, speak in your natural voice, and learn effectively.
Yeah. I also think with AI tools and tools in general, or I guess when you're dealing with humans, people are afraid to make mistakes in front of other humans. And so with an AI tool or a software tool, you're like, oh, I just made a mistake, I can just redo it again. As a salesperson, or if I do code wrong and I'm just testing it, it's easy to make a mistake. So Dana, do you find that, you mentioned encouraging people to go try AI tools and encouraging people to go test new things. Do you find that after you encourage them a couple of times, they're more willing to go and try new things on their own, or they're more willing to kind of understand that making mistakes is okay? Because similar to what you're saying, Pedro, is when I try something with an AI tool and I make a mistake, it's, next turn, let's go to the next turn. So I feel like the stigma of making mistakes is removed when you have a barrier removed like that. So do you encourage your team members, Dana, to go and try new things and then find them down the road trying more and more things without having to be encouraged to go try those things?
Oh, definitely, man. I love growth mindset. Like, and what it comes down to is putting that human imposter syndrome, shame, or what other baggage you have, thinking you ain't good enough down, and building a place where people can do that and with psychological safety. Like, I tell them all the time, I was like, y'all know that was written by AI because it has all the right commas. It's not saying random shit. It's actually a little bit more focused. And I just try as a leader to not be embarrassed about it either. It's like, hey, I'm human too. And I think, like, as somebody that's creating and producing the next set of advanced developer tools, like you best know, like how can you come, like where's your street cred? Like people are using this stuff. I think you have to be really public about it, but also like be skeptical. Like it's not perfect. I don't 100% trust it either. But again, I think the benefits are more than the cons right now if you utilize it like a tool and really put the right boundaries of how you're using it to function. But again, for me as a leader, it's taking out the hesitation, because you got to remember, right? Like tech has been through it. People are freaking like, it's a doom scroll of like what's busted up in Silicon Valley right now. We're having a moment. I hope we're on the other side of it. Those feds cut that interest rate. But I think like people are paranoid, not everybody, but a lot of people are like, hey, the economy's unstable. Like, I don't want to be found out. I'm like, no way, you're going to be better. Like if our number one goal again is to remove friction and increase productivity, you should be doing your part. And again, I don't think a lot of it is on the hard skills of like utilizing these tool sets to be better, but on the soft skills, having those moments to be like, I want to ask it this really dumb question that maybe I wasn't comfortable going in Slack and asking it, or maybe I don't want to even talk to my mentor. Don't put all your eggs into that AI basket and trust it out. But I think as a guiding point, like you're going to start self-serving those answers to yourself. And who doesn't want to self-serve? Like nobody wants to talk. I mean, I love talking to people because like, that's what I do. And I'm from the 1900s, but people this day and age, they don't be talking to nobody. Okay. Yeah. And like, that's cool. They're going to talk to you when they want to, but they're going to be more comfortable behind a keyboard. And we just have to embrace that and find different ways that people do communicate, whether it is short form video or it's other AI tools, because that's the part that they don't teach you. And as being a leader, like you have to pay attention to societal norms to understand how the current generation and the next are taking in information, especially if you're a provider of how to do that. And if we're in software, we all play a part in that experience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that at the end of the day, asking, like you were saying, asking the AI, maybe some of the questions that you think might be dumb, or, getting sort of that introductory knowledge about something out of the way, maybe it does, if used correctly, break down the barriers between human to human connection, where it's just like, what, I can actually do some of this research on my own in a very quick and concise way before I come to the table with my ideas or, So
how important, and I think this is a good thought on leadership. How important do you think it is to cultivate a culture internally where people aren't afraid to ask those, what might be considered a stupid question? Because I've in the world of alphabet soup, there's so many acronyms you never know. And some people might be afraid to ask that question. What does BDR even mean? Or, I mean, I hear acronyms all day. I don't know what they mean. So how important is it to build a culture where people are comfortable asking those questions to other humans? You can go ask AI, but I think as a leader, you also want to have that culture where people aren't afraid to ask questions, because in the end, they just want to be smarter.
I mean, I think it's a big challenge, and you're always fighting it because, as your team scales, you lose some of those opportunities for interpersonal relationships, right? We've all heard Dunbar's number of 150. You can't know everybody past that. I disagree. I don't know. I came from a small town and I knew everyone, but I do think that it starts from the top. Your job as a leader, especially as an executive leader, is to set the tone and the pace. And like, if you can show up and be your true authentic self, that gives people permission around you to do so. And that means you're going to probably F up. You're going to say something that you're embarrassed about. Like, trust me, there's not a week that goes by that I'm just like, oh, Dana Lawson, why did that come out of your mouth? Why are you you? But you know what? I am me and you're you. And I want you to be you at work, because putting energy into being somebody else is taking away from your productivity. I ain't got time for that. I want you to spend those mental calories on my stuff, which is getting shit done. And I think you have to really, again, make it really known. You have to practice what you preach, and then give people those opportunities to find the psychological safety for them to be okay doing that. Again, you can just sonder people's experiences. You're not living them. They're theirs. So you have to just kind of think about, well, how would somebody that is 12 hours on the other side of the world take this information if they don't get it from me? How do we form a relationship? So again, establishing a written culture, coming from the top down, being your true authentic self. That means messing up and being being a little scared sometimes you are. It's okay. That again, that gives permission to mess up too, because humans are fallible. But then finding other avenues where people can feel safe to be able to share and communicate, whether it's surveys, Slack messages, written, town halls, Q&As, do all the things, because you're going to need to do a wide splatter to get all the differences on how people need to be felt and heard. But again, I also try to encourage that, like, one-to-one, like, come and ask me. When my AI startup, AI Me goes, you'll pay a premium for the real Dana Lawson, but the Dana bot, I don't know, $20, I'll give you yes or no's. I joke about that, but like, I want people to come to me, because there are some things that you're just not going to get on the other end, but utilize it as a tool, practice, like, get yourself comfortable. But when it comes from leadership, there's nothing more powerful than people see that you're authentic, genuine, and real. Because I don't know, people can read it when you're full of baloney. Like, you think they ain't, they are. And maybe not everybody is, but you got some skeptics out there going like, that person full of shit. And so, I just say, don't be you.
Yeah. I love this idea of the Dana bot, or like, imagine the CTO at a company of thousands of people, that clearly it doesn't scale. You can't have a one-on-one conversations with everyone in the company, or even the CEO or something like that. But cloning that person's personality, and anyone now can have a one-on-one with the CEO at any time, right? Or the CTO. And if you want to book the real thing, like, that may happen as well. But anyone at
that rag is going to be crazy, right? Your rag, you're like, wait a minute, no, let me make my rag on lots of howdies and y'alls. But here's this, I think that's going to happen. That's what Hollywood's scared of. I don't blame them. But the reality is like, you can't take away human to human. And as a leader, again, you have to stay in line with what's happening out there and who your people are and what's important to them. And right now, it's not super easy. There's so much going on. I mean, we were all in a pandemic for 4 years. That was probably the hardest 4 years of leadership for a lot of people, because everybody on the planet was fearful. Nobody knew what was going on. And the stuff that you did know was happening, you didn't know what was really happening, because there was so much information and being blasted at you. And it was a really interesting and, I believe, challenging time for a lot of people, separating that work and life balance. And like, the world's just going to continue to get more complex, and there's always stuff going on. And, you can only play your part and do so much. So I always say, like, while you're at work, I want you to not have to worry about some of those things, but focus in, get all those chores, get the friction out of place, and just feel good about producing. Because I think a lot of humans feel good when they produce, because that's what working and living is seeing the output of your energy.
Yeah. I think sometimes that's important to remember, is to still be able to contribute in certain ways. And if we go back to a part at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned having to learn to put down some things that you used to do as an IC. I've seen CTO calendars before, so you might not have any spare time these days. Do you still get to contribute at all? Do you ever get to code or do anything fun, kind of to go back into your IC role? Or is it just spreadsheets these days?
If I touch production, like, the team would be like, smack, get out of here. Come in. What are you doing in here? So no. But no, I do on the side. Like, there's always cool stuff coming out, right? Do I do it at work? Mostly on the architectural level. I do a lot of design work, implementation, and that piece of it. But day to day, like, I have to try it out. Like, we release something, I'm the first person that's going down there, and I'm like, ooh, look at this new Astro template. And I'm a terrible web developer. Let me just be really real with y'all. Like, not my forte, more back end. But that's why I love doing web development, because I'm so bad at it. And all these tools they make it a little easier. So I'm always trying that stuff out. I'm the first to give it a go. I'm like, but I think you have to know what you're doing and pushing. Like, Netlify, we're always pushing out these core primitives that are really kind of nascent to specific things that you do within how data transmits from the internet to your computer and so forth. And there's so much nuance. And so to really get that deep, you got to kind of get in there and know what's going on different levels of the stack. And so I think, again, for myself, it can't just be all the fun soft stuff. As I say, I am basically Napoleon Dynamite's brother Kip. I love people. but I love technology too. And so on my free time, because I get my peoples at work, believe it or not, I do a lot of stuff on the side and I'm always trying it out. But yeah, I mean, it's like bits and bobs there. I've gotten really good at macros though. So if you do need some spreadsheet food, like, like call me.
You're entering those
no.
Excel competitions. You're like, I know how to do that.
Shoot. No, I'm like, now I'm telling you, this is one area where I'm like, thank you, AI. I'm like, no more, no mas. I mean, I can do it, but why would I? When I can be like, the train left the station at 2 p.m. and the other train left at 3 p.m. And there's a person that gets, I mean, I love it. AI's good at that kind of stuff.
I hated those questions in school. It just was like, it doesn't matter. Are they going to crash into each other or not? If they're not,
that's like spreadsheets. You're like, if I take column E and then I divide it by C and then a pivot table, you're like, no, I don't do it.
Yeah. So what's some of the favorite things that you've learned in your climbing to CTO? What's I guess, since this is kind of a podcast on leadership, what are some of the best leadership things that you've learned that you had no idea you would need to learn, or maybe some things that you knew you weren't good at, but you've honed that skill set? So what are some of the favorite things you've gotten great at over your time?
I would say really just, I don't know if I'm great at it, but effective communication. I feel like I got a sweet spot for it. It's not been good. I mean, like I said, like a million miles a minute. And so really practicing that focus, which I'm always still trying to refine my talking points. That's been one that I've been like, I feel kind of proud about where I've started at, because it was a lot more. Public speaking, like, you never like getting up and talking to a 5,000, 10,000 person audience is scary. Like, it is so scary. You're like, what am I doing up here? Some people are natural at it. There's like, put the mic on and let's go. And like, I play natural at it, but I'm scared every time. I'm like, oh my God. Even this podcast this morning, I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing a podcast?
I couldn't tell when you were giving a talk at the Netlify conference. I was there.
I know. I'm always scared. But I would say, public speaking is one to crack over. And like, that's a hard one for leadership. Public speaking alone, I just think it's not, not natural to a lot of people. And especially like hardcore technology is not very natural, but as leaders, you got to be great at it. You got to refine it. So it's all in that communication vein. And the other part is just like humility, right? I'm a driven person. Like, we all have ego. We all want to like crush it, win, and be the best. Man, it don't take nothing but a big smack to show you like, yeah, you ain't perfect. You broke stuff, and like, it ain't all roses. And I try to be, I try to really have self-reflection on how to show up and be better, but it takes a lot of humility because your ego can get in the way of your decision-making. And, sometimes when you're doing something so excited, you get that tunnel vision. And I think as a leader, like really taking those moments, self-reflecting on how you show up, honing your communication and putting your ego at the door is going to make you effective. And really there's no secret recipe except, continue to be smart, hungry, and humble with everything that you do, and learn, Yeah,
that's amazing. And, being that we kind of have a technical audience that views this podcast, individual contributors looking to make their way towards, leadership and management, are there any other, like, kind of as we come to the end of this conversation, like, are there any other pieces of feedback besides the one that you've just given that you'd like to leave with the audience?
I would tell these ICs, like, talk to your freaking manager, build that rapport, be transparent about your goals. Like, don't listen to me. If you want to be a manager because you just want to be a manager, like, go explore it. Like, go, even if it is for some reason that may not align with the reality, you're going to learn by having that conversation out in the open. And if you're not sure, you can always start picking up some advanced things to give you those skill sets. Like, a lot of us have engineering levels and leadership levels, and they're in plus. As you go up and you get better, you get more natural leadership behaviors on your engineering levels as an IC, and definitely on your manager levels. And so there's this expectation once you go across the chasm of senior engineer, like you should have some leadership capabilities, because your job is not just to execute, but it's to break down and execute. And to be able to break down and execute, you have to talk to people, you have to motivate them, and you have to align them. You may not be their manager, but believe me, you are just as influential, if not more. And if you really want to drive towards a position where you have more strategic input from a wider scale, again, it's about bridging into those things that you hadn't done before and honing those crafts while you have them right now. Do it now and form that relationship. Managers aren't all scary. Some are pretty good. Most of them are pretty good. And if they're terrible, do what everybody else does. Leave them. It's all right.
Well, yeah, I think that's important. Communication is big, no matter whether it's at work or relationships or family or whatever it ends up being. I've really appreciated the conversation. I'm sure Pedro has as well. Is there any last minute things that you want to promote? Maybe Netlify or your Etsy art store or analog tape backups?
Oh man, analog tape backups. Yes, come see me at veritas.dl. No. Oh, I'm going to go Google that after this. No, I do. As Pedro said, he saw me at the Netlify conference. Netlify is having our own developer focus conference October 2nd and 3rd at the amazing Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. So if any of y'all are listening and want to come out and hang out with me and see me pretend that I'm not scared, even though I'm absolutely scared. Apparently Pedro said I was good at it. Thank you. That really actually helps. Come on down, come hang out with us. Tickets are on sale right now. And there's also, I heard, some codes out there if somebody, doesn't have all the cash to spend and still wants to come and hang.
Awesome.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for your time, Dana.
Yeah, really appreciate it. I don't think I've smiled as much in any of these podcasts. You're just amazing to talk to. So definitely appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Well, I had a great time too, y'all. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me.